Mark Giglio is a graduate of the class of 2000 at Bishop Hyman St. High School. When Mark was here, he participated in track and football. He was a member of our campus ministry team, and he was part of that team that went down to Appalachia in a very, very hot time, I believe. Right, Mrs. Deathrow was one of those who went with them. I think it was 100 degrees every day while they built houses. 114? 104 in the shade. So for 6 or 7 days. And they lived in a small home and helped the people of Appalachia. If you know anything about that, we're talking about the mountains of Kentucky and West Virginia. Very, very poor, rural people. When Mark graduated from Timon, he went to Nike University. He was enrolled in the ROTC program. If you know what ROTC is, it's Reserve Officer Training Corps. So after Mark graduated from Nike, received his degree, he went in to the United States Army as a second lieutenant. And Mark served a tour of duty in Iraq for 15 months. He was there from October of 2006 to January of 2008, during one of the most violent times in the Iraq War that we are still participating in. After he came back from Iraq, he was assigned to Fort Hood, Texas, where he served for an additional 2.5 years, and when he left service, he attained the rank of captain. While he was in Iraq, he was a Bradley fighting vehicle commander, so he was in charge of 10 soldiers, and it was a very awesome responsibility to tour and to patrol Iraq and be responsible for 10 other men, and women also. When he came back, you may recognize Mark because he was here a couple of weeks ago when we introduced the Dave Caring. He was one of the guys who spoke. And some of you basketball players, raise your hands who went up to Mark's place of employment up at Freedom Village up in Sanborn, where he's helping addicts, and he'll continue to do some work with returning veterans. And so in commemoration of Veterans Day, and how many of you know a veteran? How many of you raise your hands? So somebody in your family or related to you is a veteran. And so the great sacrifices that they made, hopefully you'll thank them, not only on Monday, but for a long, long time. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you today, Mark Giglio.
So I want to start by thanking Mr. Sullivan and Timon for welcoming me here and to give me this opportunity to speak to you about some of my experiences. Also to thank you on behalf of the other veterans in the community. I like to think that I can be their voice today for that. When Mr. Sullivan asked me to speak last week, I hadn't thought about the details of my deployment, of my time on active duty at some time. But at the same time, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about the deployment in some general terms. Something just triggers me to remember that, or just makes me appreciate what's going on. So we talked to, I only wanted to speak for about 10 minutes, and he wanted to allow me 30 minutes, which is a lot of time. So the other part of that is I want to hear from you. I want to get your questions when we're done here. And we talked about limits with questions, and I've heard pretty much any and every question that there is out there. So when I'm done speaking here in a few minutes, I encourage those questions, and don't feel like they're a stupid question or anything like that. Ask it, and I'll answer it for you. So that's the part that I'm looking forward to after this. To start, like you said, I went to Niagara University. At that time, there was no point in my life where I knew or thought I was going to join the military. I graduated here in 2000. I had no intent or no clue that the military would be a part of my life. How it happened was in 2000, I commuted to Niagara, and I had a friend, Jason Kazurski, who graduated with me in 2000, who was doing the ROTC program. So some nights I would stay up there with him, and I was talking to him and said, well, your room and board's paid for, your tuition's paid for, and you're getting a stipend. So it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. So how do you get this, he showed me, I applied, and, I got approved, and I signed my life away in April 2011, and I had really no clue, looking back on what I was getting myself into. It turned out that it was the best decision I've ever made, but at that time I had no clue. I signed in April 2011, and then in September 2011, 9/11 happened. So who would have thought, So now, it was kind of inevitable at that time. I was a junior, I think I was a junior, freshman, sophomore, whatever it was. I knew that when I was getting out, when I was graduating from Niagara University, that I'm probably going to war. But it still hadn't sunk in yet. So May 2005, I was commissioned. I went to train in Oklahoma for a few months, and then I went stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. Early 2006, we were notified that you're going to be deploying at the end of the year. So we trained throughout that year, and then in August 2006, I was assigned as a Bradley commander, also as in charge of 10 guys. As a fire support officer for Alpha Company 15 Cav, which is part of the 1st Cavalry Division, which I think most would recognize as simple. So I had 10 guys. The oldest guy was 28, the youngest guy was 19. Some had combat experience, but most hadn't, neither myself, obviously. So towards the end of that year, we knew we were getting deployed mid-October. We left mid-October for Kuwait. We arrived in Kuwait. We did about 2 weeks of train-up, just doing weapons qualifications and driver's training with the Bradleys and the Humvees. Just learning, really just tuning up our skills that we had learned throughout the year. And then we were sent off. One night in Kuwait, they had a concert there. It was just a concert for the troops, and in the middle of the show, we got a tap on the shoulder. It said, we're going. And that was it. So we left the concert, we got our stuff, and we were on a plane for Iraq. So we arrived early November 2006 in Amaria, which is in western Baghdad, in Camp Liberty. So Amaria in western Baghdad was, everybody knows who Saddam Hussein was. That's where his loyalists lived. And that's where the Sunni elite lived. So the town that we were in, at one time, had beautiful mansions, engineers, lawyers, doctors. That's where they lived. And it was a Sunni-dominated area, which Al-Qaeda would soon claim as their stronghold, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So we lived at Camp Liberty, which is right near Camp Victory, which has been in the news. And that's where we stayed. And then we would also transition out to a combat outpost in the middle of Iraq in mid-2007. So initially when we were deployed, we were supposed to deploy for just 12 months. And then in January 2011, I don't know if anybody remembers the surge, but President Bush announced the surge. So it was an increase of 30 to 40,000 troops in the Anbar province, which we were at. And then it also affected us in that our deployment now went from 12 months to 15 months. So around that time too is when we suffered our first casualty. So the first time one of our soldiers was killed from our company. So morale was low as it was, and then that hit too. So it was a real killer at that time. And being that, going back to the part with Al-Qaeda operating our neighborhood, the casualties started increasing, and we started getting hit a lot more. Since Amaria was a town where Saddam's loyalists lived, Al-Qaeda, which is Sunni, came into the town and claimed it as their headquarters. So what they would do is they increased attacks on us, more bombs, more mortars, more gunfire, just more attacks in general. When that started to increase, I went on my rest and relaxation, or my R&R to Germany. It was like at the end of April 2011. So I went there for 2 weeks. I actually stayed with Kinzerski the guy that I went to high school and college with, stayed there for a couple weeks, and I came back. And as I was coming back, I read the paper, and I noticed that another one of our soldiers had gotten killed. So what happened with that is, I think it was around like May 2nd or so, an IED hit his vehicle and completely destroyed him. There was nothing left of him. Another soldier in the vehicle lost his leg, and another one lost his eye. And with that, I had a couple of my soldiers that were in the Bradley at that time with them, and I remember speaking to him when I got back, and he was telling me how he had to get the guy's foot off of the top of the truck and take it, and also get the other soldier's remains. So that's kind of when it started to hit home that this is getting really serious. A few days later, another soldier was killed, and the soldier that was with him broke both arms and both legs. That May 2011, was the worst month of our tour. We suffered, as a company, which is about 120 people, we suffered 8 casualties. Casualties being those that are killed, and others that were wounded. Our battalion as a whole lost 14 soldiers. In one day, and that's from that book I was telling you about earlier, in one day we lost 6 guys. It was May 19th, 2007. A deep buried IED hit a Bradley, and Bradley's a tank, flipped it over upside down, blew the turret off, and was on fire for about 2 hours. So we couldn't get to our guys that were inside of it. There was really nothing we could do until that fire died down. We lost 6 guys that day, and that was one of the roughest days of my life and their life too. At that time, that day, was when we were going to establish a combat outpost in our area. So a combat outpost being, instead of just operating out of Camp Liberty, where it was safe, we went and we took over a water treatment plant that was vacant in town, and we lived in the middle of town. And that day was the day we were supposed to take it over. As we were moving out, or as they were moving out to occupy that outpost is when they got hit. So common sense would think, well, let's just push it back a day or two and take care of this. But our commander at the time said, we're not giving them that satisfaction. We're going through with it, which caused a lot of anger in the company and the battalion, but we did it. Once we moved out there, we lived out there half the time we lived out there, half the time we lived back. We received some attacks when we moved out there, but surprisingly, after the first couple of weeks or so, we didn't get attacked there too often. It was rough. It sucked for the first couple of months there. It was hot. It was in the beginning of summer. There was no water, no plumbing, no electricity, no air conditioning, not too many windows. I just remember sweating profusely when I tried to go to bed. Flies everywhere. For the first couple of months it was rough. After that, we got money put into it. So we eventually had internet, phone, TV, gym, but it was nothing like you have here. It was kind of, we put it together from the materials that we had, but after a while, I enjoyed staying out there more than I enjoyed staying back in Camp Liberty, because it was ours, and it was kind of some peace at times there. So with that too, once we had those luxuries, we still didn't have running water or plumbing, so it was baby wipes, and we had a burn pit to burn our business in when we were at the end of the day. So at that time, our soldiers were struggling too. Some of my soldiers got into steroids because there really wasn't much to do besides work out, read, sleep, watch TV or watch movies on your laptop or whatever. One of my soldiers got hooked on pills because of an injury he sustained. Took him, he was high, he crashed a Humvee. They were just distraught and really had no motivation to continue, especially with such a long road ahead after we got extended. About that summer, about July or August, some vigilantes in the town, nicknamed the Freedom Fighters, stood up and wanted to take their town back because they were sick of having their family and friends being killed. You know, their bodies would be dumped on the side of the road. We'd have to pick them up. They were sick of that. They were sick of being intimidated. So they stood up, the Freedom Fighters, and eventually eradicated Al-Qaeda from our town. And they took their town back. In 2008, January 2008, we redeployed. I was on the last plane back, so I was like 2 days short of 16 months. We all missed 2 Christmases, 2 Thanksgivings, 2 New Year's. I think it was like the last season that the Sabres were doing well. They made a run in the playoffs, so we missed that. And we spent almost 16 months of our life over there. After redeployment, like Mr. Sullivan said, spent 2.5 years at Fort Hood. I was actually on Fort Hood the day the shootings happened. Got out of the military, went back to school. I'm in the National Guard now. A year ago at this time, we were down in New York City in support of Hurricane Sandy. And currently working at Freedom Village working with vets. We just opened a couple weeks ago. We only got 4 vets in there right now, but hopefully that picks up soon. And that's it. I'm looking forward to your questions.